Hello and welcome to all you hunters of facts, seekers of knowledge, and to those just a little bit curious to FactSam, and another episode of Who, What, Why, Where, and When, the series in which we explore many aspects of our history, including important people, places, and events. In this episode, we'll explore a major turning point in the history of England, the Battle of Hastings. Let us begin. On the 14th of October 1066, the armies of King Harold II and William Duke of Normandy fought a battle which would decide not only who ruled England, but could also change the country forever. But who were these men? Why were they fighting? And what impact did the result have on England? These are just some of the questions we will be exploring. Let's start by taking a look at the events which led up to the battle. On 5th of January 1066, the childless King Edward the Confessor died, leaving no heir. This left Harold Godwinson, the wealthiest and most powerful of the English aristocrats, as Edward's most immediate successor. On 6th of January, Harold was crowned as Harold II in a ceremony which most likely took place in Westminster Abbey, but there is no surviving evidence from the time to support this. However, Harold had his crown challenged by two neighbouring rulers. The first of these was Duke William of Normandy, who claimed King Edward had promised to name him his heir during a visit in 1051, although this could be put down to Norman propaganda. The second was Harold III of Norway, also known as Harold Hardrada, whose claim to the throne was based on an agreement between his predecessor, Magnus I of Norway, and King of England, Harthacnut. In this agreement, if either died without an heir, the other would inherit the thrones of both England and Norway. Both these men began to assemble armies and plan invasions immediately after Edward's death. In early September, Harold of Norway, supported by Harold of England's exiled brother, Tostig, invaded northern England with a fleet of 300 ships and between 7,000 and 9,000 men. Upon hearing of the invasion, Harold of England, who had been in southern England awaiting an invasion by William, quickly headed north, gathering troops as he went. On the 25th of September 1066, the English forces reached the invading Norwegians. The army had travelled with such speed that the Norwegians were caught off guard, as they were not aware of any forces in the local area. After an intense battle, which lasted for several hours, later known as the Battle of Stamford Bridge, Harold of Norway and Tostig were both dead, along with 6,000 men from the Norwegian army. However, the English army, despite victory, suffered heavy losses, potentially around 5,000 men, with the survivors being left tired and battle-worn. But they did not have much time to recover. 3 days later, on the 28th of September, William and his army landed on the south-east coast of England. It is not known whether Harold received the news of William's landing while still around Stamford Bridge, or if he was already moving south. However, he did not travel as much haste this time, taking around a week to reach London, then spending another week there, possibly to gather more men. William, meanwhile, had built a wooden castle at Hastings, which was used to raid the surrounding area. On the night of 13th of October, Harold camped at Caldbeck Hill, around 8 miles from William's castle. Harold tried to surprise William just as he had to the Norwegians, but William's scouts were able to send a report, and William decided to advance his army, whilst Harold set up a defensive position on top of Senlac Hill. There is some uncertainty regarding the numbers which fought in the battle. Contemporary writers place William's forces anywhere between 14,000 and 150,000, and Harold's between 400,000 and 1,200,000, although these numbers are today believed to be largely inflated. Modern historians range William's army anywhere between 7,000 and 12,000 men, and Harold's between 5,000 and 13,000. The most recent figures put both forces between 5 and 7,000. However, most importantly was the type of soldiers fighting. Harold's army consisted entirely of infantry, the core of which consisted of housecarls, full-time professional soldiers, and one of the finest infantries in Europe at the time. However, he would have had very few bowmen, and despite having horses, the English army preferred fighting on foot. William's army, on the other hand, consisted of around 2,000 to 3,000 cavalry, around the same number of archers, and an infantry the same number as the other two combined. These numbers would prove to be decisive in the battle. At the top of the steep slope of Senlac Hill, Howard's forces deployed into a small, dense formation. With their flanks protected by woodland, marshy ground in front, and a shield wall in their front ranks, they may have felt fairly safe and secure in their position. Meanwhile, the Normans split their forces into 3 groups, with each group consisting of a front group of archers and foot soldiers with spears behind, whilst the cavalry was held in reserve. In order to win, all the English had to do was stand their ground behind their shield wall and hold back the Norman assaults. The Normans, meanwhile, had to climb the steep slope and try to break the English lines with their archers so that infantry and cavalry could come through and finish them off. At 9 a.m. on the 14th of October, the area was suddenly filled with the sound of trumpets, signalling the start of the battle. To begin with, the Norman archers shot uphill at the English, but this had very little impact, as the arrows either hit the shield wall or flew straight over the top of the hill. They were also disadvantaged by the lack of English archers, with few arrows being available to gather and reuse. After this tactic failed, William sent his spearmen to attack, but they were soon met with a barrage of spears, axes and rocks. When this attack failed to break the lines, William sent in the cavalry, but this also failed and a retreat began. It was at this point that a rumour William had been killed began to spread and cause confusion. Some English forces began to pursue the retreating Normans, but William emerged, declaring he was still alive, and led a counter-attack against the English, leading to some of the English forces being overwhelmed. The fighting possibly paused briefly in the early afternoon for lunch and rest, which probably went a little like this.
This battle, she is so exhausting.
I agree, old chap. So, why don't we take a little break, have a spot of lunch, and meet back up in an hour?
Ah, excellent idea. Au revoir.
However, William was able to use this break wisely, thinking up a new strategy. Seeing how the English lines had broken when his forces retreated, he decided to send his cavalry to attack the shield wall, then retreat in an attempt to draw out English forces, then counter in a feigned flight tactic. This was used at least twice, and whilst it did not break the English lines, it potentially thinned them out. It was recorded that the English forces were so tightly packed that the dead could not fall and the wounded could not remove themselves from the fight. William himself was said to have had at least 2 horses killed from under him. But then came the decisive moment. Dusk was approaching. Harold's 2 brothers and several other English commanders were dead. The Normans began another assault on the English lines, preceded by another barrage from the archers. During this assault, Harold was killed. It is unknown who dealt the fatal blow, and it is unclear exactly how he died. Most sources claim he was hit in the eye by an arrow, with some saying this killed him, and others saying he was immediately run down by horsemen. Some claim that he was simply run down, with one source claiming William himself dealt the blow, but if this was true, it would have been recorded. One source claims Harold was drubbed to death, which sounds pretty brutal, but even more brutal is the claims that he was hacked to death by 4 knights as such. The first, cleaving his breast through the shield with his point, drenched the earth with a gushing torrent of blood. The second smote off his head below the protection of the helmet, and the third pierced the inwards of his belly with his lance. The fourth hewed off his thigh and bore away the severed limb. Well, ouch. But whatever the manner of Harold's death, the outcome was the same. Leaderless, the English lines began to break and flee. The Normans relentlessly pursued them, killing all they could reach and winning the battle. Despite winning the battle and Harold being killed, William still had to fight for what he thought was his. But instead of submitting, the English crowned Edgar the Evelyn as king. Therefore, William decided to advance on London, and after failing to take the city from the southeast over London Bridge, he decided to go around and attack from the northwest. The English leaders eventually surrendered to William, and on the 25th of December 1066, William was crowned King of England, thus beginning an era of Norman rule and influence, which is still felt today. The first of these influences was on language. William's conquest brought with it a form of French, which was then made the official language of William's court, which gradually blended with Anglo-Saxon English and eventually evolved into modern English. There are also changes and influences in government, most notably changing the language of official documents to Latin. The biggest governmental influence, however, was the Domesday Book, a large census of landholders in England. A survey of this type was unique to Europe at the time and gives us a good idea of the nature of the country in this period. It is estimated that around 8,000 Normans and other Europeans emigrated to England and eventually began intermarrying with the native English. Many genealogists believe that around a quarter of the population of England today descended from William himself. The Norman period also saw the building of many castles throughout England, the most famous of which is the White Tower at the Tower of London. In 1070, William founded Battle Abbey on the site of the battle, with the high altar supposedly on the spot Harold died, and the town of Battle eventually being built in the surrounding area. The events leading up to and including the battle were soon after recorded in the Bayeux Tapestry, a 70-metre long and 20-centimetre tall embroidered cloth, although most historians believe it wasn't made in Bayeux, and that it isn't a tapestry. But whatever. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, then it would be greatly appreciated if you could leave a like. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then hit subscribe. If you are feeling extra generous, then please support me on Patreon, where you will receive a variety of rewards, including early access to videos and the opportunity to choose topics for future videos. Once again, thank you for watching. I've been Faxam, and I hope to see you again soon.